Before we check into today's video, please quickly check below to see if you've subscribed. It's totally free and allows you to never miss one of our stories. Uxior stood on the observation deck of his exploratory spacecraft, his deep blue eyes reflecting the swirling blues and greens of the planet below. Known to its inhabitants as Dirt, it was a dangerous death world, according to the ship's AI. Oblivious to this danger, Uxior's two chemical-sensitive antennae twitched intermittently, sampling the sterile air inside the cabin. Softly lit by the control panels, the complex patterns on his emerald-green skin shimmered, needing continuous dampness to function. He let out a sigh, his antennae drooping slightly as he checked the status of various systems. Life support, optimal. Navigation, optimal. Yet, boredom seeped in as he watched the sluggish progress bar of the autonomous scanner. The ship's AI was deep in its task of deciphering the complex human communication networks, harvesting an immense collection of data. Uxior tapped his soft fingers on the console, yearning for a more engaging activity. A soft chime indicated new data from the scanner. Uxior's eyes widened as he skimmed through images of the planet's terrifying creatures. Apex predators with rows of serrated teeth, venomous insects, and microscopic pathogens capable of causing ill even the mightiest beings. So engrossed was he in these revelations that he missed the blinking warning about potential collision with space debris. Another alert flashed, noting the AI's inability to correct the ship's trajectory due to computational overload. But Uxior's attention was fixed on the image of a colossal sea creature that dwarfed even the humans, making them seem insignificant by comparison. A deafening crunch echoed through the ship as alerts of danger popped up on every screen, followed by a loud metallic clang. Several fragments peppered the vessel in rapid succession, ricocheting off with a chorus of clanks and bangs. The entire craft lurched and groaned under the assault, the view outside becoming a deadly kaleidoscope of twisted shards and splintered glass. Panels shorted out, spraying sparks, while the interior lights flickered chaotically. Uxior's antennae twitched frantically, overwhelmed by the harsh scent of smoldering circuits and burnt ozone. A sudden jolt rocked the ship, snapping Uxior out of his astonishment. "What in the cosmos?" He stared in disbelief at the external sensors displaying a swarm of debris surrounding his vessel. Twisted metal shards and defunct satellites whirled chaotically. "How could a supposedly intelligent species allow so much junk to float aimlessly around their own world?" he muttered, antennae stiff with disbelief. Shaking off his shock, Uxior forced himself into action. The realization that humans disregarded the catastrophic chain reactions their debris could cause unsettled him. Each collision could spawn more fragments, leading to an impenetrable barrier of wreckage encasing the planet. He swiftly accessed the damage reports. Primary thrusters offline, hull integrity compromised. Determination set in as he began assessing what could be salvaged. The ship's self-repair systems had activated, nanobots swarming over damaged components. But time was not on his side. Full restoration would take longer than the drag of the upper atmosphere would take to pull his ship down. Running a diagnostic, Uxior calculated that by ejecting all non-essential weight, specifically the ship's water reserves and compressed air, he could achieve a safe landing descent. It was a sacrifice, but a necessary one. Preparations were made with meticulous care. Vents opened to release the precious resources into the void of space. Securing himself at the helm, Uxior contemplated the challenges ahead. Landing on a death world meant entering survival mode. He would need to filter the planet's toxic air to replenish his own supply and venture into its wilds to collect water, all while avoiding its myriad dangers. As the ship breached the upper atmosphere, turbulence battered its weakened frame. Flames licked at the viewports, and the control panels flickered ominously. Scanning for a suitable landing site, Uxior's gaze settled on a vast, even field of green, a promising oasis amidst the planet's rugged terrain. Descending closer, he realized with alarm that his high-altitude perspective had deceived him. The small plants were towering stalks that stretched skyward. Consulting the human data, he identified the area as a cornfield. Confusion washed over him.
Humans consider this small vegetation?
He whispered incredulously. The incomplete database had failed to convey the true scale, and he braced himself for a challenging landing. Hands steady on the controls, Uxior maneuvered the ship through the labyrinth of colossal stalks. The vessel skimmed past the giant leaves, which slapped against the hull with unsettling thuds. Despite his efforts to minimize impact, warning lights illuminated the cockpit as new damage registered. Finally, the ship lurched to a halt, nestled among the alien greenery. Uxior exhaled slowly, surveying the flickering systems. The landing had spared his life, but left his ship in dire straits. Uxior hurriedly donned his nanosuit, the flexible material conforming perfectly to his emerald frame. He secured a chemical protection mask over his face, its filters humming softly as they shielded him from the Deathworld's air. Moving swiftly, he powered down all non-essential ship systems to conserve energy. The quiet that followed was unsettling. He glanced around the dimmed interior, taking in the scorched panels and flickering lights. The destruction was more extensive than he'd realized. Initiating the self-repair protocols, he steeled himself for the prospect of venturing outside, hoping the ship would be flight-ready upon his return. For the first time in all his Deathworld explorations, Uxior approached the secured safe near the ramp. With a quick biometric scan, it unlocked to reveal his portable laser gun. The weapon felt foreign yet reassuring in his grip. Attaching it to his nanosuit, the fabric morphed seamlessly into a scabbard to accommodate the gun. Just as he was about to descend, a thought struck him.
The oxygen, the water, those are my priorities, he muttered.
Rushing back to the bridge, he commanded the ship to start replenishing his air supply and activated the four-legged water tank, a robotic carrier designed to follow him and collect water from an external source. As he opened the hatch, laser gun in hand, Uxior was surprised to find the mobile water tank already deployed. The machine towered over him where the ramp met the earth, its metallic legs anchored firmly in the soil.
At least something is functioning properly,
he mused, a flicker of relief easing his tension. Stepping onto the alien ground, he was immediately dwarfed by colossal plants. The corn stalks soared into the sky, their enormous leaves forming a canopy that filtered the sunlight into eerie patterns. Uxior forced himself to calm down. Downloading the incomplete information about this planet into his nanosuit, an integrated visor slid over his deep blue eyes, feeding real-time data directly to his optic nerves. He gazed around, and the scanner labeled an enormous green protrusion as a corn cob.
These are considered small plants?
He whispered in disbelief, as the towering water tank followed obediently as he took his first cautious steps into the Deathworld. Curiously, he scanned a stalk, only to be disappointed by its low water concentration. Realization dawned that he would have to journey much farther to find sufficient water. Taking a deep breath, Uxior accepted the challenge ahead. He commanded the water tank to halt and climbed atop it, taking manual control. As the metallic legs began to move under his direction, a brief sense of satisfaction washed over him. But the feeling was fleeting. A glance back revealed his ship disappearing among the towering stalks, and a sense of isolation tightened around him. As the sun shifted a few degrees in the sky, his initial caution gave way to overwhelming boredom. The endless rows of gigantic corn formed a monotonous maze, each identical to the last.
Is this the terrifying Deathworld?
He dared to think. Immediately he regretted the thought. His scanner detected movement ahead, a rustling in a pile of dead leaves. His fingers tightened on the trigger of his laser gun. A warning flashed across his visor. Scan complete. Predator, reptilian, snake. Before he could read the full report, a pair of piercing eyes emerged from the leaves. The creature raised its head, revealing a serpentine body that seemed to stretch endlessly. Its scales shimmered with colorful hues, and its forked tongue flicked the air as it fixed its gaze upon him. As the creature slithered closer, panic surged through Ixior. He raised his laser gun and fired repeatedly. Beams of light struck the snake, leaving dark burn marks on its thick hide. To his horror, the reptile merely hissed, momentarily recoiling before surging forward with increased speed, its eyes now blazing with aggression. The legless predator weaved through the corn stalks with unsettling agility, its massive form crushing dead corn leaves as it approached. Consumed by primal fear, Uxior shouted a command to the water tank robot. The machine lurched forward, accelerating as fast as its joints would allow, the ground a blur beneath them. The pursuit was a frantic blur of motion. The robotic legs pounded the soil in relentless pacing, while the snake closed the distance with terrifying speed. Corn stalks whipped past, their giant leaves slapping against his visor. Uxior's heart pounded in sync with the machine's strides. Noticing the snake was gaining on them, Uxior overrode the safety protocols, pushing the carrier robot beyond its designed limits.
"Increase speed by 30%,
he commanded. A heat warning flashed, but he ignored it.
40%!
The machine groaned under the strain, but the gap between them and the predator began to widen. Relief washed over him as the snake faded from view. His triumph was short-lived. An overhanging leaf struck his head, nearly knocking him off the water tank. All traces of boredom were gone, replaced by a heightened sense of vulnerability. Each passing moment amplified his unease. But as he looked ahead, the dense cornfield began to thin, revealing an open view under a clear sky. Uxior found himself in a vast field dotted with unfamiliar structures, artificial constructs that contrasted sharply with the natural landscape. He surveyed the area, his gaze betraying his awe and apprehension. Massive red edifices with sloped roofs stood nearby, their surfaces worn yet sturdy. Strange wheeled machines rested beside them, hulking metal contraptions with enormous tires and intricate mechanisms.
"Are these creations of the humans?"
he wondered aloud. His visor labeled them: barn, tractor. He realized he'd stumbled upon a human farm. The duality of technology and nature was fascinating and unsettling. The sheer magnitude of the buildings and machines around him left Uxior in awe. The towering structures and colossal equipment reminded him of the mountains on his homeworld, their size alone enough to reaffirm this planet's status as a death world. Shaking his head to dispel the fascination, he refocused on his mission. Lingering in the open was dangerous. Commanding the carrier robot forward, he navigated cautiously, his instincts alerting him that exposure in this vast space could spell disaster. Moving swiftly from one hiding spot to another, Uxior advanced toward a large structure labeled barn by his visor. Peering through its slightly ajar door, he spotted equipment identified as irrigation systems. Hope flickered within him. Perhaps this place held the water he so desperately needed. Fearful of being spotted, he overrode the carrier robot's safety limits once more. The machine surged forward, the ground beneath becoming a blur as he raced toward the barn. His heart pounded in his chest, every second stretching into an eternity as he closed the distance. Inside the barn, the air was thick with dust and the scent of aged wood. Beams of sunlight crossed through the gaps in the walls, casting bright patterns on the floor. His visor scanned the myriad objects around him, stacks of hay, rusted tools, and rows of mysterious machinery. He navigated through the clutter, eyes darting in search of any water. Frustration mounted as each scan came up empty. The reality of his predicament sank in. Without water, returning to his ship would be futile. He couldn't risk powering the engines or attempting to move to another location without the necessary coolant. The prospect of his demise on this death world loomed ever larger. A flicker of movement caught his attention, snapping him back to the present. His visor locked onto the source, a creature labeled rat, classified as a non-predator. It was roughly his size, with curious eyes and twitching whiskers. The rat approached cautiously, its tiny paws making barely a sound. Uxior's initial fear subsided slightly. Remembering how ineffective his laser gun had been against the snake, he decided to observe rather than react. Besides, atop the carrier robot, he held a size advantage. More rats began to emerge from hiding, surrounding him with an air of innocent curiosity. Uxior felt a surprising sense of camaraderie. These creatures didn't seem threatening. In fact, they appeared almost friendly. An idea sparked. Perhaps he could follow them to a water source. Just as he was forming a plan, chaos erupted. The rats scattered in all directions, diving into holes and behind objects. Uxior was taken aback.
What happened?
He wondered, perplexed by their sudden fear. A chilling sound answered his unspoken question. A low, ominous meow echoed through the barn. His heart leaped into his throat as he turned to face the new threat. A sleek, muscular creature emerged from the shadows, moving with effortless grace. His visor identified it. Housecat, small-sized predator. Frozen in place, Uxior couldn't believe the term small applied to the beast before him. The cat towered over him, its eyes sharp and calculating. Each step it took was graceful, its movements the epitome of elegance. A surge of panic shattered his paralysis. Commanding the carrier robot, he made a desperate dash toward the barn's exit. They burst through the door, and for a fleeting moment, relief washed over him. The cat hadn't followed.
Maybe it's confined to the barn, he hoped.
His hope was short-lived. With a powerful leap, the cat bounded from one hay bale to another, effortlessly sailing through the air to land gracefully ahead of him. It blocked his path, eyes locked onto him with predatory intent. Panic engulfed Uxior. Initiating a rapid scan, his visor analyzed the cat's capabilities. The data was grim. Unparalleled reflexes, speed, and agility. Resistance seemed futile. This creature could very well be the apex predator of the galaxy. Nothing in his database compared to its lethal efficiency. Despair threatened to consume him. Even pushing the carrier robot to its absolute limits wouldn't outpace the cat. As he grappled with hopelessness, a thought struck him. The rats had evaded the predator by disappearing into tight spaces. Perhaps he could do the same. Overriding the safety protocols once more, he commanded the carrier to increase power by 50%. Instead of fleeing across open ground, he veered sharply toward a nearby pile of cut wood. The robot accelerated, moving in a blur as it closed the distance. Reaching the woodpile, Uxior leapt from the carrier, leaving it as a decoy. He squeezed into a narrow crevice among the logs, the rough bark scraping against his nanosuit. Inside, the scent of earth and sap enveloped him. The space was cramped but safe. The cat couldn't reach him here. Surrounded by the familiar presence of the rats, he felt a flicker of relief. The tiny creatures regarded him with curiosity and acceptance. In this tight haven, Uxior waited, heart pounding, hoping the predator would lose interest and move on. Uxior watched with mounting anxiety as the cat approached his carrier robot. The feline's whiskers twitched inquisitively as it sniffed the metallic surface, its paws batting gently at the robot's joints. Each tentative touch sent a spike of worry through Uxior. He knew that if the carrier was damaged, his chances of returning to his ship would diminish drastically. Helplessly, he hoped the creature would lose interest, praying it was more fascinated by living prey than inanimate machines. To his despair, the cat seemed increasingly intrigued. It circled the robot before lying down beside it, curling its tail around its body. The feline's luminous eyes locked onto Uxior's hiding spot, almost as if it knew exactly where he was. It playfully swatted at the robot's appendages, teasing him, as if daring him to come out. A cold dread settled in Uxior's stomach. The predator was toying with him. Realizing that he couldn't afford to lose the carrier robot, Uxior mustered his courage. Overcoming his fear, he stepped out from his concealment. With a steadying breath, he pointed his laser gun directly at the cat's nose and fired repeatedly. Beams of light shot forth, aiming to startle and deter the creature. The cat leaped back with a sharp hiss, momentarily stunned by the unexpected assault. But the reprieve was fleeting. Its gaze returned to Uxior, now filled with a keen intensity. The brief flash of pain seemed only to have piqued its predatory instincts. Uxior felt a chill as he realized this formidable creature might stop at nothing to catch him. As the cat began to approach with slow, measured steps, its muscles coiled and ready to pounce, Uxior swallowed hard. How many more times could he fend it off before his luck ran out? Just then, as he edged backward, eyes locked with the advancing predator, a much larger being loomed behind the cat. Two enormous hands descended, effortlessly lifting the feline into the air. The cat, the embodiment of predatory perfection, suddenly appeared vulnerable. It squirmed and twisted, ears flattened and tail lashing, but could not free itself from the giant's grasp. Uxior watched in astonishment as the once fearsome creature now displayed evident fear. Quickly activating his visor's scanner, Uxior analyzed the newcomer. The readout identified the being as a human child, male, noting the peculiar object on its head labeled as a hat. Panic surged through him. It was too late to hide. The child's forward-facing eyes were already fixed upon him. There was an undeniable spark of intelligence in that gaze, one that sent a shiver down Uxior's spine. A flood of questions raced through his mind. Should he attempt first contact? Use his nanosuit to translate his speech? But all these considerations evaporated when he noticed the enormous object clutched in the child's free hand, an item uncannily similar to his own laser gun, but vastly larger, nearly the size of the cat. In a heartbeat, despair gripped him anew. His visor labeled the object toy gun. A toy and a gun? The juxtaposition baffled him. Unable to reconcile the terms, and blaming his incomplete database, Uxior instinctively raised his laser gun, aiming at the child's nose in a desperate bid for self-defense. An unexpected expression spread across the child's face. A smile. The corners of his mouth turned upward in what seemed like amusement. Mirroring Uxior's action, the boy raised his toy gun, adopting a stance that exuded confidence and a lack of fear, as if he were a fierce warrior. The sight of the gigantic muzzle aimed at him nearly stopped Uxior's heart. Abandoning any thought of aggression, he hesitated. The boy, however, pulled the trigger without warning. A powerful stream of transparent liquid erupted from the toy, striking Uxior squarely in the chest. The force sent him hurtling backward against the pile of wood, the relentless flow pinning him in place. It took a moment for Uxior to comprehend that water was assaulting him, the very resource he so desperately sought. The pressure was overwhelming, pressing him against the rough timber and soaking him entirely. Trapped by the torrent, he could only watch helplessly as precious water spilled onto the ground, immediately absorbed by the barn's dusty floor. When the deluge finally ceased, Uxior collapsed onto all fours, gasping for breath. The human child examined his toy gun with a puzzled frown, shaking it and peering into the nozzle. Disappointment clouded his features. He unscrewed a compartment, turned the gun upside down, and a solitary drop fell to the ground. Clearly disheartened by the empty reservoir, the boy shrugged and trotted away, the cat nestled in his arms. Left alone, Uxior was surrounded only by the cautious re-emergence of the friendly rats. Dripping wet and trembling, Uxior struggled to process the surreal encounter. How could such a young being wield so much power so casually? He glanced at the peaceful rats scurrying about.
"How do these gentle creatures survive amid humans and cats?"
he whispered, marveling at their resilience. Taking a deep breath, he turned his thoughts to the carrier robot. Was it still operational? With unsteady steps, He approached the machine and commanded it to run a self-diagnostic. Relief washed over him as the readout indicated all systems were functioning properly. Frustration gnawed at him when he considered the wasted water. Opening the tank's lid, he used his visor to estimate the volume lost. Ironically, the amount that had drenched him would have filled the carrier to capacity. He glanced at the rats, a wry smile forming beneath his mask.
"All that water gone,"
he said, knowing they couldn't understand. Still, voicing his exasperation offered a small comfort. Resolving to continue his quest, Uxior instructed the carrier robot to stand. Its 4 legs unfolded smoothly, stabilizing as the platform lowered for him to climb aboard. Weariness tugged at him, but he pushed it aside, determined to find a water source. As soon as the mechanical legs began to move, a familiar jet of water struck him and the robot. The human child was firing from the barn's entrance, but at this distance, the stream lacked the force to immobilize them. Seizing the moment, Uxior directed the carrier toward the cover of a nearby hay bale, the robot's legs moving in a hurried gait. Safely behind the bale, he cautiously peeked out, trying to understand why the child persisted in this bizarre assault. Yet there was no time to ponder. Unencumbered by the cat, the boy sprinted around the haystack with surprising speed. Another stream of water surged toward Uxior, this time with enough force to knock him off the carrier. He tumbled to the ground, his arms instinctively shielding his head as he landed. The stream of water struck Uxior as he lay on the ground, but this time it lasted only a fleeting moment. Drenched and bewildered, he looked up to see the human child turning the toy gun upside down, a look of disappointment crossing his face as nothing but a few stray drops fell out. The boy trotted away again, and Uxior's heart sank. It was only a matter of time before the child returned for another round of humiliation, and with it, more precious water wasted on the barn's dusty floor. Watching the retreating figure, a realization dawned on him. If the boy's return was predictable, perhaps he could find a way to make this relentless assault work to his advantage. Ideas swirled in his mind, each more ambitious than the last. Could he communicate with the human? Signal his need for water? But those strategies seemed fraught with risk. Then, recalling how his initial act of pointing his laser gun had prompted the boy's aggressive water attack, inspiration struck. Perhaps he could use that reaction to fill his water tank. Eager to act, Uxior clambered onto the carrier robot, commanding it to open the water tank compartment. The lid slid back, revealing the emptiness inside. The sight fueled his determination, bolstering his courage to proceed with the daring plan. He guided the robot around the barn, searching for the perfect spot. Maneuvering past piles of logs and shelves lined with tools, he dismissed each location in turn. Then he saw it, a gap between 2 massive haystacks positioned just right. Glancing toward the barn entrance to ensure the boy hadn't returned, he hurried the robot into place, orienting the open water tank toward the doorway. With everything set, Uxior took cover behind the tank, his heart pounding as he awaited the boy's return. It wasn't long before the child reappeared, stepping cautiously into the barn, eyes scanning the dim interior. Needing to draw attention, Uxior commanded the robot to nudge a pile of hay. The rustling sound did the trick. The boy's gaze snapped in his direction. Their eyes met, and Uxior raised his laser gun, deliberately provoking the child. A grin spread across the boy's face, a mixture of mischief and delight. Just as Uxior anticipated, a stream of water burst forth from the toy gun, arcing directly into the open compartment of the water tank. He ducked behind the robot as droplets splattered around him, the sound of water hitting the tank's interior like music to his ears. The flow ceased, and Uxior peeked over the edge of the tank. The boy was inspecting his now empty gun, a slight frown on his face. Seizing the moment, Uxior climbed atop the tank and brandished his laser gun once more. The child's eyes lit up, and without hesitation, he dashed off to refill his weapon. The plan worked flawlessly. 2 more times the boy returned, and each time Uxior repeated the sequence, provoking the child and capturing the precious water he so desperately needed. After the 3rd round, he checked the tank's levels. It was full. Quickly, he sealed the compartment and prepared to leave. Casting a final glance at the friendly rats, he directed the carrier robot to move. They slipped out of the barn, eager to be gone before the boy returned yet again. Outside, Uxior navigated behind the colossal wheel of a tractor, its immense size offering a perfect hiding spot. A sense of accomplishment warmed him. His unconventional strategy had succeeded beyond his hopes. Peering from his concealment, he watched as the boy re-entered the barn. Confusion clouded the child's face as he searched the empty spaces, behind hay bales, near the tools, among the wood piles. Frustration grew with each fruitless glance. A pang of empathy touched Uxior. Despite their earlier encounters, the child hadn't truly harmed him. In fact, the boy seemed more playful than hostile.
Perhaps he never intended real harm,
Uxior thought. It dawned on him that the human could have easily overpowered him in numerous ways, yet chose the water baths instead. Determined to convey a more nuanced report, Uxior decided he would personally document his experiences, supplementing the AI's data with his own observations. The humans were complex beings, not merely violent or dangerous, but capable of curiosity and even kindness. Activating his nanosuit's navigation system, he instructed the AI to chart a path back to his ship through the corn forest. The journey began, the carrier robot moving steadily under the weight of the full water tank. The towering stalks stretched above him like the pillars of an ancient temple, their rustling leaves whispering secrets in the evening breeze. Despite his earlier triumph, unease gnawed at him. With the robot burdened, their pace was slower, and the threat of predators like the snake loomed large in his mind. Every snap of a twig or rustle in the underbrush set his nerves on edge. But as the sun dipped lower, painting the sky with hues of amber and crimson, the familiar silhouette of his ship came into view. Relief flooded through him at the sight. Not only was the vessel still there, but his visor displayed a promising update. The self-repair systems had completed their work. The ship was operational once more. Uxior commanded the ship to refill its water supply. A mechanical arm extended from the hull, delicately grasping the water tank from the carrier robot and transferring its contents into the main reservoir. Once the process was complete, he instructed the carrier robot to return to its designated compartment. Entering the ship, Uxior swiftly activated the filtration systems to purify the newly acquired water. With a hint of apprehension, he reactivated the life support and navigation systems, preparing for departure from this formidable death world. As the ship ascended and hovered above the cornfield, Uxior felt a surge of relief. The massive stalks of corn shrank beneath him, their towering forms giving way to the patchwork of the planet's surface. With a single command, the vessel soared through the atmosphere, piercing layers of clouds until the inky blackness of space enveloped it. Gazing down, Uxior's deep blue eyes reflected the swirling blues and greens of the planet. His recent ordeal had reshaped his perception. The Death World was both a place of peril and a source of profound wonder. Despite this newfound appreciation, true solace only came when the ship reached a distant orbit, far beyond the hazardous belt of space debris that had ensnared him before. Here, his instruments confirmed a clear path, free from the chaotic remnants of human technology. Uxior allowed himself a moment of calm, antennae relaxing as the danger subsided. He settled into a comfortable seat on the viewing deck, the vast void of space stretching out before him. Below, Earth rotated slowly, a mesmerizing sphere of life and mystery.
"Computer," he began, "integrate the recordings from my nanosuit into the mission profile."
The ship acknowledged with a soft chime.
"Initiate personal log.
He continued, his voice steady.
Integrate the log into the mission profile.
Taking a deep breath, Uxior started his account.
This is Uxior of the Sephorian Exploration Fleet. This log details my personal encounter with Earth, a death world of giants. After an unexpected collision with orbital debris, I crash-landed in what I initially perceived to be a forest of colossal plants. These were, in fact, fields of corn, a species that grows fibrous protrusions the humans refer to as cobs.
He paused, recalling the daunting scale of everything he had faced.
Earth is indeed home to fearsome predators, and by crashing there, I've come to understand that size is a concept that matters. My standard-issue laser weaponry proved ineffective against even the smaller fauna. This suggests that our current armaments are insufficient for defense on such worlds. Development of more potent equipment is imperative should future exploration be necessary. Importantly, I observed that humans do not appear to be malevolent by nature. One young human in particular engaged with me not out of hostility, but curiosity. However, caution is advised. Even the young carry what they call toy weapons, which can pose significant risks to beings of our stature.
Uxior leaned forward, his expression thoughtful.
On a final note, my experience suggests that it might be possible to establish a friendship with them. Let that be recorded for posterity.